All right, let's run through answers on the homework assignment for today, page 177, review exercise B. This, of course, is with pronoun case, so it'd be a good idea to have this chart with you so you can remind yourself of what part of the sentence it is, and therefore which pronoun is correct. Remember that for this assignment, the book is just asking you about the pronoun, but I also wanted you to decide what part of the sentence that pronoun was. It's kind of like showing your work. Prove to me that the pronoun you selected is the correct one. There are some of these sentences that have multiple clauses, and so when that's the case, I will underline the section that we need to focus in on. Luckily, the first one only has one clause, so we can leave it as it is. So we have Tina talked Susan and blank into going on a canoe trip. So if we're just doing our basic rundown, which is a good way to go for taking apart these sentences and figuring out the parts we need, Tina is the subject, talked is the verb, and Susan and I or me are going to be a direct object. And since it's a direct object, that means we go with objective, which means our answer is me. Number 2 is a very similar sentence. Father, subject, told, verb, and then again, Susan and I or me is going to be a direct object, compound direct object there. And so again, objective, we go with me. Number 3, we do have multiple clauses. So we have he warned both Tina and we or us. And then we have a new one start with that. That we would probably get a good dunking, which I will try to underline more neatly. And a good dunking, and then one more at the end with before we were through. So on this sentence, if you were going to ask yourself, what's the subject? Well, it depends on which clause you're talking about. In the clause that we care about, the clause that has a pronoun that we have a question on, he is the subject, warned is the verb. But we also have we as a subject here and would as a verb. Would get actually. And then in the last clause, we have another we as a subject, were as a verb. So it's looking like, oh, we use we here and we use we here, so maybe we use we in this first spot as well. Well, let's look at what it's doing in that clause. He is the subject, warned is the verb, and warned is an action verb. We could say warned whom. The answer is Tina and we or us. So again, Tina is a direct object and we or us is another direct object, and so it's objective. That makes us the correct pronoun. Number 4, the clause that we want to look at starts after the comma. Susan and I or me could barely steer our canoe. Could steer is a verb. The subject then is Susan and I or me, compound subject there. And I is the nominative that we want for a subject. Number 5, we watched another canoeist and saw how she or her and her partner maneuvered their craft. The clause that we care about starts here with how. So how she or her and her partner maneuvered their craft. In that part that's underlined, she or her is a subject, her partner is a subject, maneuvered is a verb, craft is a direct object. So since she or her is a subject, means we want to choose she as our answer. And I'll mention, I'm going through and marking all of the sentence parts. You only had to say what sentence part the pronoun was. I'm going through the whole thing just in case if you have one of them incorrect, this might help you understand what the answer is supposed to be. Number 6, we have several clauses as well as having more than one pronoun we have to figure out. So this one we have first, they and we or us both did well. That is one clause. And then we have until we hit the rapids. That's another clause. And then our last clause is the rapids hit we or us. So in the first clause, they and we or us are the subject. Did is the verb. So since we or us is a subject, we go with the nominative case, we. Then second clause, nothing we need to pick. We do see that we is the subject, so that's why it's a nominative case. But then we look at the last clause, the rapids hit we or us. So we know hit is the verb. The thing or things doing the hitting are the rapids. And since it's an action verb, that means whatever follows it is going to be a direct object, which means that we want to go with us, objective, for a direct object. Okay, on to the next page. This one is a compound sentence. So we have Susan grabbed our bags. Okay, we don't need to worry about that part. It's this stuff with following and that's the clause that we care about. She or her and I or me both scrambled for our food cooler. Both of those are going to be subjects. The verb is scrambled. And since they're both subjects, they both need to be from the nominative column. So we go with she and I. Now, a quick point that I want to make, this is something that sometimes can help you check your work. If you have something that is compound and you have more than one pronoun being linked together by a conjunction, it's good to know or good to kind of keep in mind that anything you pick to be compound, those two things are going to need to come from the same side of the line, from the same column. So you could have he and I, but you could never have he and me, because that crosses the line. You could have she and they, but you couldn't have she and them, again, because it crosses the line. So that means that we could either have she and I or her and me, but we're not going to crisscross those. Of course, this one is not too difficult with recognizing those as the subject, so she and I are going to be the answers. But that's one thing that can sometimes help you narrow it down. Also, if the book is already telling you one of those pronouns, then and that pronoun already is in nominative case or objective case, you can use that as a hint to figure out which case the other pronoun is supposed to be as well. So let's say we had this same sentence on number 7, but they just had the word I here. They didn't make you choose on this second one. They just said I. Well, then if you're given the option between she and her, since it's a compound section of the sentence, if it's linked to a nominative pronoun, then this other one has to be nominative too. Okay, number 8. All of us would be campers. All is the subject. Were drenched is the verb. And we're going to have a second clause, so we'll come to that in a second. And we or us would be campers. This is counting since of is a preposition. We or us is an object of a preposition. And this is kind of an unusual scenario, but it's we or us is being renamed by would-be campers. So basically it's like we have two nouns back to back, one's renaming the other, and a positive is technically what that is called. Since it's an object of a preposition though, we know it needs to be objective, so us would be the answer. So all of us would be campers, were drenched. And then we looked at the second half of the sentence, no quitters were we or us. And to be honest, neither one of those sounds very great. No quitters were we. No quitters were us. So we're really not going to get anywhere by just asking ourselves what sounds right. But quitters is the subject, were is the verb, were is a linking verb, which means that whatever comes after it is a predicate nominative, which means the answer is supposed to be we. That's why it's so important that we're able to identify the part of the sentence, because it's not always reliable to say, oh, this one sounds right. It's a predicate nominative, so it's definitely nominative case. Number 9, we have multiple clauses again. So my father's warning haunted all of we or us. So the warning is the subject, haunted is the verb, and whom did it haunt? All is a direct object. And since of is a preposition, we or us is going to be the object of a preposition, which means it should be us. My father's warning haunted all of us. Okay, then we get, as we or us starved adventurers stared at waterlogged hot dogs, soaked rolls, and biscuits with tadpoles in them. Gross. But really, it's only the beginning part of the sentence that we care too much about. So here's one that is kind of like this structure on number 8, where there's an appositive. There's a noun that's renamed by another noun. Starved adventurers is renaming we or us. But one of those, whichever one you want to say, counts as the subject of the sentence. So you could say we or us, and of course, since it's nominative, it's a subject, we're going to say we. You could say we stared at the waterlogged hot dogs, or the starved adventurers stared at the waterlogged hot dogs. Either one of those is going to work, since one is just renaming the other. But the subject, since it's the subject, that means it's going to be we. Number 10, looking at this portion before the semicolon, there are already 2 clauses in there. First one is all the way up to discovered, and then we have a new clause starting with that and going to the semicolon. So looking at this part in red, we have Susan as a subject and I or me as, not as a verb, as another subject. It's a compound subject, and discovered as the verb. So since it's a subject, it's nominative, it should be I. And then in the part after the semicolon, we have, after a squishy cold night, I decided. That's a new clause. And then we have another clause, wise are, and I just noticed a typo. That should be they or them. Let me fix that real quick so that makes a little bit more sense. Although it's still a weird sentence. And then there is yet another clause in here, because 1, 2, 3, 4 was not good enough. So our next one is going to be who heed the voice of experience. All right. So really this part in green is the only one we need to worry about, but I do want to make sure that we double check our pronouns. After a squishy cold night, I decided. In that, I is a subject and decided as a verb. So yeah, we're good. It's a subject that's nominative, so I is the correct pronoun. This next part underlined in green, wise, is actually a predicate adjective. Are is the verb, and they or them is the subject. So that's already an unusual sentence. It's kind of a Yoda sentence where it takes the normal sentence order and flips it around. Wise are they? They are wise. If we flip it around the normal way, then in, say, subject, verb, predicate, adjective, then it sounds pretty normal. They are wise. But when we flip the subject to the end like this, we invert the sentence, then it's still going to be they, because it's still the subject of the sentence. And then lastly, if we're looking at the last part of the sentence, double checking our pronoun, who heed the voice of experience. Who is a subject, heed is a verb, and voice is a direct object. And who is correct because it is the subject of that clause. All right, so that wraps up our review of just the basics of pronoun case. The next thing we're going to look at then is incomplete construction. So, incomplete construction is when we have a sentence that has some kind of a comparison and we don't fully complete the thought, hence incomplete. So we end up having as or than usually towards the end of the sentence. And we shorten one of the ideas basically just so we can avoid repetition. So in this first example, I'm comparing how many carrots Butters eats to how many carrots Pumbaa eats. If I say Butters eats more carrots than Pumbaa, what's implied is that I'm saying Butters eats more carrots than Pumbaa eats. So the comparison is between Butters eating, sorry about that, is between Butters eating and Pumbaa eating. But in order to avoid that repetition of eats, we just say Butters eats more carrots than Pumbaa. So if we were going to switch that up and add in a pronoun instead of using Pumbaa, it's going to be the same as we did before, looking at, okay, what part of the clause is it or what part of the sentence is it? And if we're looking at what the complete construction would be, Pumbaa eats, well, Pumbaa is a subject, eats is a verb, which means that the pronoun that we would want to substitute is he. So our complete sentence then, if we put it all together, if we're using a pronoun, is Butters eats more carrots than he, rather than Butters eats more carrots than him. And again, that's because he is the subject of this implied clause. We would be saying eats afterwards. We're just shortening it up. Okay, then the second sentence, we have Pumbaa eats more lettuce than carrots. And on this one, the incomplete part is a little bit different. Pumbaa eats more lettuce than he eats carrots. In this sentence, we're not comparing what Pumbaa does to what carrots do. We're comparing how much lettuce he eats to how much carrots he eats, or how many carrots he eats. So the thing that we're skipping, the thing that we're implying or leaving out is the he eats. So at the bottom, we've got examples that actually use the pronouns in there. So let's look at those. So we want to use the pronoun form that would be correct if we did complete the construction, hypothetically. So Butters likes carrots more than me. What this is saying, if we put our little carrot in here, a different kind of carrot. If you say Butters likes carrots more than me, you're implying Butters likes carrots more than he likes me. The reason why it's me in that sentence is because he is the subject and likes is the verb, and me is supposed to be a direct object. If we do the exact same sentence, but we change, we take the me and we change it to I, well, the meaning is different. Because the part that we're leaving out is Butters likes carrots more than I like carrots. That's the bit that we are leaving out. And for that incomplete construction, I is a subject. Like is a verb and carrots is a direct object. So basically, when you look at the sentence, and especially if you're trying to choose which one is correct, read the thing all the way through and think about, if I were to fill in the rest of the sentence, what would it sound like? Complete the construction, then look at the completed construction, figure out what part of the sentence the pronoun is supposed to be, and then go ahead and select the pronoun of the correct case. So the assignment for tomorrow is page 188, exercise 17. And I mean, you can just pick whichever pronoun is correct, but be ready to justify your answer by pointing out what the rest of the construction is supposed to be. And that'll wrap us up for pronoun case. I will go through answers on this on the next video.